I think the main goal that we would have set ourselves is to work in the year 2013 and beginning of 2014 maybe even on the revision of the seed marketing legislation and plant health legislation. Both of them together with an overall legislation that is governing basically the way that the European Union and the national bodies are going to work together to harmonize the application of legislation in the area of plants and seed. These three together are the main focus of our work in the coming 12 to 15 months, I suppose. Our main goal or goals in that area are very likely to, on the one hand, maintain the pillars of the existing legislation, which in short could be summarized as identity, quality, and performance. So basically the pillars meaning identity, DUS for plant varieties, so they need to be distinct, uniform, and stable. But then also quality, so they need to be certified, they need to have a certain quality, the product that we're going to sell. But also then performance, the VCU, where it applies to the agricultural crops. Are these varieties really of a specific use for agriculture? So I think that is the core, if I may say so, of the area of the seed marketing legislation. And in plant health, maybe together with seed marketing, our focus would be on trying to establish the European seed industry as a partner in the administration and in the implementation of the legislative system. And that mainly means, can we work as an industry under official supervision of official bodies in order to carry out tasks that are assigned to the legislation in either seed marketing or plant health. So I would say these are the three major areas of legislation, and these are the two major principles and concepts that we would like to see enshrined in the new legislation. We have made IP, of course, not only part of our mission statement, so that already shows the importance that we assign to intellectual property, but everybody who's involved in seed and plant biotechnology knows how important indeed appropriate intellectual property rights are for the future sustainable investment in research and innovation in the sector. We have finalized our ESA view on intellectual property in March of this year. This has also been taken over also by the International Seed Federation in a very similar position, less differentiated and less focused on a specific legislative background like in Europe. But the principles enshrined in the ISF legislation are more or less identical to what we have defined. And we are now basically in the process of trying to implement the things that we would like to see in intellectual property legislation in our sector. In Europe, we currently have two major elements that we are looking at. One is we have a discussion on the establishing of a true European patent. So no longer mutual recognition of national patents, but a true single title, like we have for the community plant variety right. We would have a community patent. So one application, but then coverage for the European Union as a whole. And we try to firmly establish a breeder's exemption in that European patent, which we would find very important, in particular for those countries where the seed sector is not that strong, to argue for such an exemption on a pure national basis. So that's our main focus. This issue is just being discussed between the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers, so meaning member states. And we hope to conclude on this before the end of the year. But there are some overriding issues that are not related to actually the point that we are trying to make, but rather a power struggle between the two institutions that might influence this more than we do with our subject. But the subject as such is now well known and well established as part of the debate. The other part that I would mention is indeed the actual way that courts deal with patent applications, and that they also try to establish where are the limits to patentability. We have had a number of cases on European level where we have tried to define the boundaries of what is still patentable and what is not. We have a Supreme Court, if I may say so, decision for the technologies that are being used, so really what breeding techniques may be patentable and maybe not. But we are now looking at the second element of that, and which is the products resulting from those elements. Are they, or from these techniques, are they patentable, yes or no? So once we get clarification on those two points, and possibly accompanied with a breeder's exemption in the European patent, then I would say we could confidently say that the vast majority of the ESA position on IP is already implemented. In addition, what we're doing is a couple of administrative issues, meaning trying to improve the transparency. We are setting up a European portal for patent information on plant varieties. That is basically a service that we're trying to establish for the members so that breeders know right from the start whether or not a certain plant variety does carry patented elements. And they can make up their mind whether or not and in what way they're going to work with this material. We have developed this program over the past good 2 years, and we have done a lot of technical work so far, which was to establish a true standard, so what elements are actually necessary to assure that the seed treatment process, as well as then the quality of the treated seed, are in line with the expectations not only of the industry itself, but also then with potential legislation or requirements regarding environmental impact and so forth. So that has taken us quite a bit of time. Also because these issues need to be discussed before the background of different crop protection products, as well as different crops and how they interact. We have in addition established a guideline how we think that external bodies, in this case independent certifying bodies, would need to look at the seed treatment process in companies so that they better understand what is it that they're actually auditing and how they should look at the process in the companies. So we are now having all of these elements well established and agreed in the sector, and we are now moving forward to the actual implementation. So basically trying to start seed companies and seed treatment providers to actually go and ask independent auditors to certify their treatment sites according to the standard that we have established on European level. Provided that companies pass that certification, they may apply for the use of a very specific trademark and logo that we have developed on European level, and which will basically be the branding of European seed to say, this seed has been treated according to a certain quality assurance program, and with that you will have it accepted also in other parts of the European Union. So confidence, reassurance of farmers, but also official bodies, that the seed that actually is then hitting the market in other parts of Europe is in line with the requirements of that country. And all of that without concrete legislation, but really based on an industry quality assurance and an industry desire to improve the quality of their products. So that is a very exciting time, and we are hiring a manager in ESA to specifically work on this subject, and a dedicated manager for the running of this program in the future. So we also hope that that will help to spread it out all over Europe as quickly as possible. My fear is that the answer would be rather negative. The feeling that I have is still that Europe is maybe changing slowly, but we're not there yet. I think even in Europe, which is still, even at times of economic crisis and financial crisis, an area of prosperity and stability. But even in Europe, we're starting to understand a bit better, I think, the challenges that lie ahead of us as regards issues such as, for example, food security. And based on that, I think there are more and more Europeans that start to develop an understanding that we need to also take our own responsibility in Europe at contributing to food security. Nowadays, Europe is the single largest importer of agricultural products in the world. We are, if we translate it into acreage, we are 45 million hectares short in Europe in order to actually produce what we need to feed our cows, our pigs, our poultry. Now that's roughly the size of Germany. So that's a lot, it's significant. So we do import all of that from other parts of the world, and that is mainly, of course, the Americas. And that is based on the most modern production techniques that these regions have deployed, and that includes biotechnology. So the European position is still, well, it's a hypocrite position, we have to admit that. And I think people start realizing that. So I would say, yes, there is, if I may say so, the wind of change is blowing, but we are not there yet. I don't think we would yet find a majority in Europe really willing and actively supporting the introduction of plant biotech as far as genetic modification is concerned into European agriculture. I think the European Commission has tried very hard to cut the Gordic knot. They have proposed a system by which basically the decision on whether or not a genetically modified organism would be considered to be safe for both the environment as well as then for food and feed use on European level. So to have one safety evaluation on the European level and one decision. But then to leave it to the member states to decide on whether they actually want to grow the crop. Because as we know, the opposition is much more towards the environmental area, meaning the actual planting, rather than to the food and feed use, because we are indeed importing millions of tons of these products every day. So they have really tried their best. But for the time being, we don't think there is any majority on political level to go in that direction. The Commission is also, because of that, now considering to at least have good implementing measures that will help the sectors that are concerned with the differences of application and authorization status between, for example, North and South America and Europe, to actually have practical measures that they can work with. And that is mainly thresholds or tolerance levels that we would establish. For the time being, we only have that for approved GM food and feed products. But we now, for the first time this year, have had it implemented also for what we call low-level presence of feed material. So actually, GM products that are not authorized yet in the European Union, but that are authorized, for example, in the US or in Brazil or Argentina, where we would now start to have an acceptance of an extremely low level. And that extremely low level de facto is more a translation of how do you actually measure the presence of these products. And there's a certain statistical reliability of your tests, so you would know below 0.1% you cannot actually tell whether something is in or not. What we're seeing now is that the Commission is trying to extend this concept of a sampling and testing methodology also to food products and also, and most importantly, to seed. So if that would really be the next step, and we are very much supporting the Commission in this, that would be a great step forward, in particular for the European companies, because as you know, we do not have really authorizations for cultivations of GM crops here in Europe. So we are really depending on this kind of a tolerance for those events that are already well established and approved in other parts of the world. But that is indeed our most principal concern, that we have seen a technology or technologies that were to a large extent developed by European researchers, both in public research institutes as well as in private companies. So a lot of investment has gone or did go into the development of these techniques. And in the end, because of the way that we organize the legislation, but also, and I think we have to be fair on that, also maybe the lack of communication from our own sector towards the users of the techniques, but also then towards processors, toward food companies, retailers, we have lost those techniques. We have a climate, or at that time we had a climate that these techniques didn't really have a chance to become firmly embraced by European farmers and accepted by European consumers, and obviously that means also then by food companies and retailers. Our fear is that a similar development could happen once again if we look at the so-called new breeding techniques. And the new breeding techniques have a similar issue as regards, for example, their denomination. We are talking about things such as cisgenesis or RNIA mutilation. I mean, these things are not easily explained outside of the immediate plant breeding sector. So we have to understand that there is a skeptic public and that there are very careful food processors, retailers, and food companies that want to make sure that in the end they don't have products that are not going to be accepted by the consumer. So before that background, I think it's very clear that we need to do a good communication from the side of the industry to make sure that people understand the importance of these new breeding techniques for the European plant breeding innovation, because we want to assure that we also in the future we will develop European products for the European market. And these techniques are decisive for our ability to do so also in the future.